You're listening to a podcast of spurious morality. Hello and welcome to a podcast of spurious morality. I'm Johnstone and with me this week I have Gareth. Hello.
Hello there.
And there's been a bit of Doctor Who on telly, hasn't
A little
there?
bit, yeah.
Just a little
it
bit.
Snuck
just,
in there.
Yeah, just kind of, we didn't really see it coming. It wasn't really spoiled or advertised. It was just there. Yes, so we're here today to discuss The Star Beast. The first of three specials to celebrate the 60th anniversary, and it's bringing back David Tennant and Catherine Tate. It's great. It's just so good to see these characters again, and there's a lovely wave of nostalgia that comes with it.
They've not missed a beat.
No, absolutely not. Within minutes, it was like, oh wow, we're exactly where we were 15 years ago, and it's amazing. It just hasn't, and they're so good together, and they always were good together. But before we carry on, I will warn our dear listeners that there will be spoilers ahead. We are going into a spoilerific discussion of the episode, so if you've not seen it yet, press pause, go and watch it, and then come back, obviously. So that's the spoiler bit out of the way. So let's kick off with the fact that it's David Tennant and Catherine Tate in Doctor Who, written by Russell T Davies. It's brilliant, isn't it?
I was going to say I'm not as nostalgic for Series 4 as I think most people are, but I still really enjoyed it, and I can still recognise how big a deal this is for people. And yeah, just to see the two of them on screen together, you can tell they've, kept in touch, never lost the old rapport.
And I suppose the pair of them, the careers have just got bigger and bigger and bigger since they're in. I mean, they were both sort of on top of the world when they were in Doctor Who. I remember at the time. Well, even Russell T Davies, in the writer's tale, even Russell T Davies couldn't quite believe that he'd got Catherine Tate for a whole series.
Yeah, she was quite a get. That was quite a big deal.
And it sort of, it did turn into something special. That Series 4 is pretty much universally beloved. And it's... I think that it's certainly not my favourite. It's certainly not my favourite of New Who. It's certainly not my favourite of all the Doctor Who. But it's the one I can kind of point at and go, this was actually Doctor Who firing on all cylinders. This was peak stuff.
Yeah, I think it was. It's probably fair to say it was sort of peak popularity for the show as well. I mean, not like forever. It's not like it never got that big again. But in terms of kind of hype, I mean, I remember the phrasiness of after the Stolen Earth airs, it looks like the Doctor's, regenerating, and just the absolute lunacy in on television and everywhere about what was going to happen next. I remember there was it might have been Graham Norton, but there was an interview with Catherine Tate, and she just happens to be sitting next to James Nesbitt, who's just one of a million actors who they were all just firing out as a possible replacement. And it's just fever pitch, and it's just, you don't just get that. That's a show at the height of its powers, really. So the kind of nostalgia in this, I think, works on a couple of levels, and one of them is just, good God, we were huge, and we will be again. So that's kind of a nice feeling.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's just immediately trying to recapture that, and I think from the
Mm.
the first few minutes after the opening titles, like I said before, it just immediately felt like I was right back there. I was watching that Doctor Who at its popular pinnacle kind of thing, and yeah, it just immediately kind of snapped into it. And I think that's it's obviously a very very sort of deliberately done, well thought out thing. They are very much going, well, that was brilliant. It was 15 years ago. Let's just go back there. Let's take everybody back
Mm.
there. And I've heard some people sort of go, well, it's not really celebrating 60 years. It's celebrating 1 year of those 60 years. But taking it back to certainly a peak in popularity and a creative peak as well, I think. Russell T Davies in that fall series was absolutely on fire. I think
Yeah.
that is a good way to celebrate the 60th. I think going back to when the show was at its best, I guess, inverted commas. I'm not saying that Series 4 was
Mm.
the best Doctor Who ever has been, but it's certainly a notable period of the show's history.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for because like my other half watched it and kind of went to me afterwards. Was that the 60th anniversary episode? And I sort of see that point of view of like it's not really doing anything that you would expect it to for the anniversary. It's kind of a big traditional Russell T Davies episode in many ways. Not it's not the Day of the Doctor or anything like that. I think one thing to bear in mind. I think it's fair what you've said that it's kind of it's going here's Doctor Who. It's in fine fettle. Isn't that a great thing? So hooray for that. But also there are 3 specials. So I'm kind of hedging my bets a bit and thinking by the time we get to the giggle, that will probably feel more like um, a sort of overall Doctor Who shindig. I might eat my words. We will see. But yeah, I struggle to really believe that the Star Beast is kind of presented as there you go, that's your lot. I mean, we know it's not. There's 2 more episodes to go, but I'm thinking the anniversary-ness is kind of being drip fed at this stage.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the main purpose of the Star Beast really was reintroduce Donna, introduce Donna's family, and all that kind of thing. It was very much a Rose, Smith and Jones, partners in crime type episode.
Yeah.
Launching this. I mean, they're calling it 3 specials. It's essentially a mini series. It's
Yeah.
it's 3 episodes of Doctor Who on consecutive Saturday nights. It is a mini series basically, and it's. I think if you look at it from the point of view of a series opener as opposed to the 60th anniversary special, you're far more likely to get more out of
Yeah.
it. I think.
Yeah, it does. It's sort of pitched a lot like one of Russell's openers. I mean, Partners in Crime, obviously, series 4 is a good kind of one to think of because it's Doctor and Donna, and the comedy in that is just sort of exquisitely pitched, and the plot is kind of a sort of a necessary thing, but it's not the reason you're here, and that's kind of I think that's even more the case here. It's fully appreciate it's an adaptation, and we'll get into that. But the focus is certainly on the Doctor and Donna, and it's like, well, okay, that's the reason we're here. We've got Beep the Meep, but that's kind of the B plot, as I think it is. But yeah, it's all about introducing those characters, and we have that strange introduction at the start where the Doctor and Donna are both separately talking to themselves slash the camera, which I kind of assume is a Disney Plus thing. Like obviously we saw it on BBC, but I'm assuming it's there because they've kind of thought, right, this is the big launch for Doctor Who for worldwide, and they probably haven't seen series 4, so I guess they need a bit of a recap. Because if you watch the episode, obviously, they do delve into all of this stuff. They make it very clear what the status quo is with these two characters. Um, so yeah, it was a strange opening scene, but I'm willing to accept it's probably a business decision has been made. Like, maybe Disney went, "Oh, can you give us a leg up?" Actually, so a very surprising opening, but that's okay. I'll put up with it. How did you feel? Did it bother you at all? Or
Yeah, it felt a little out of place. It felt very un-Doctor Who. But
Hmm.
yeah, I totally see why they did it. They couldn't not do it, and they couldn't just do a previously on Doctor Who and show some clips. It did need the context. It needed the Doctor, and it needed Donna, and all that kind of thing. And I suppose really what you have to bear in
Yeah.
mind is there are people that weren't alive when Journey's End was broadcast that will be watching this, that have maybe
They
been
walk
watching
among
Doctor Who
us.
for a few years,
Yeah.
It's, when I think about it, it's the gap between Journey's End and the Star Beast is actually, what was it,
Hmm.
14 years, 15 years. Like, I wasn't that old when Doctor Who
Yeah.
came back. I was 12, I think, 12, 13, something like that, when Series 1 aired. So it is quite a chunk of time. And
Yeah.
yeah, I really do think that it needed just filling in somehow, and you can't rely
Hmm.
on everyone will have seen Journey's End and have fond memories of it and all that kind of thing. To a lot of people, this will be the first Doctor Who they see, potentially.
Hmm. Yeah. That's exactly right. I think. Yeah.
But it totally did its job. It wasn't particularly jarring. It didn't sort of take me out of anything. I didn't not like it. I just
Yeah.
I think it needed to be there, and I'm glad it was there because everyone is automatically caught up in the space of 2 minutes. And it was just so good to see them on screen again.
Yeah, it's tough for fogies like us to imagine what it's like for younger people who haven't seen the show at all to be just presented with David Tennant and he looks at Catherine Tate and he obviously feels a certain way and just think that's a lot of history. So yeah, it's to cope with that as well as all the concepts of Doctor Who, which you've got to kind of squirrel in there as well. Yeah, yeah, it's fair. I'll give it a pass.
Yeah, it definitely gets a pass. Um, so let's move on to our next point, and obviously this was an adaptation of a
Hmm,
much loved comic from. It was a very very early comic, wasn't it? I think it was one
I
of
think
the
so.
first ever Doctor Who comics. And obviously, Big Finish have got their version of the Star Beast that they did in comic adaptations a few years ago. So it's, I think it's probably arguably the best known Doctor Who comic there is. I think that's a reasonable thing to
Yeah,
say. The fact that I
yeah.
know about it kind of proves that I'm not a comic guy at all. I couldn't really tell you anything about Doctor Who comics.
Hmm.
Um, so it's kind of like the one area of the Whoniverse that I've just entirely missed out on. And that's just me, personal preference, comic thing, really. But it's, yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's even before, obviously, it was adapted for TV as this big budget, amazing relaunch. It was probably the best known Doctor Who comic, and the Meep, Beep the Meep, has appeared in other Big Finish stuff, I think, and that kind of thing. So it's, I think it was, a good one to adapt. It was a good one to pick up. It's a fairly simple, straightforward story. It's your classic alien looks cute, but it's actually a bad guy type
Yeah.
thing. It's been done before. It was done in Unquiet Dead, third episode of the Russell T Davies era. So just sort of how familiar are you with previous versions, and sort of what are your thoughts on those, and
Um,
what are your thoughts of this as an adaptation?
well, I'm in a similar boat where I didn't read the comics, so but again, I had heard of this, so that I think that is the litmus test, really. I think the first reference I came across with Beep the Meep was probably in Doctor Who: The Completely Useless Encyclopedia. Don't know if you ever read that. It's a classic. Very funny book. Anyway, it's got Beep the Meep's song in it, which I think ends with "Who's next for the chop." And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hoping that would make it into the episode, but alas. Um, I have heard the Big Finish adaptation, which I enjoyed a lot. Tom Baker obviously having lots of fun on that one. Um, yeah, so the broad strokes of it, as you say, it's pretty straightforward. You know, you've got the thing. It's adorable. Turns out it's a horrible megalomaniac. So I'm not too precious about it. I don't mind that they've changed a bunch of stuff. Obviously, it's 14th Doctor and Donna and all of that stuff. I thought the Meep itself was incredible. That's a lot has been said about this online already, but just as long-term viewers of Doctor Who, looking at a creature like that, just the level of complexity and effort that's gone into that thing. I mean, I was very, Doctor Who Unleashed is now a thing, and I saw that afterwards, and you could see the amount of effort that has to go into it. So you've got a prosthetic, you've got a sort of costume that can be worn and walked around, and you've got additional little CGI bits, and the whole thing just adds up to basically just marveling at it, just being like, God. I mean, this is so great. I mean, it's Doctor Who is full of monsters that you really have to take with a suspension of disbelief, and that's fine. That's part of the deal of being a fan. But yeah, good lord, it kind of makes you think, well, what else are we in for? I mean, if they can make this look this good, and obviously Miriam Margolyes, perfect casting. She actually, I believe, accidentally announced to the world that she was the Meep before the BBC had done. She had her second book published, Oh Miriam, and I think it mentions that she's the Meep. And I think that was the first official confirmation. But yeah, she's absolutely who you want to kind of straddle the line between adorable, funny little voice and a cackling monster.
Yeah, and the sort of switch between the two is just so brilliantly done. Like the sort of Stones of Blood inspired court scene in the car park. I've seen a
See,
lot
I,
of
I
people.
had kind of mixed feelings about that. Oh, so there we go. What were you saying? I'll see if I'm copying those people.
Well, a lot of people I've sort of reading on Twitter and so on have kind of said that they did prefer the original version of the reveal, and I do quite like it in Big Finish where you can kind of hear the Meep's internal monologue, and that's kind of when you realise that they're not this cute little fluffy victim; they're actually a very nasty megalomaniac. And I get that. I think I maybe do prefer that as well, actually. But I like that the Doctor worked it out, and that's one thing that I kind of that does sort of baffle me a little bit about the original. It's that the Doctor doesn't work it out till a lot later, and it's. I think it's kind of obvious. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. It's like, Doctor, you've met many, many, many cute little aliens that have turned out to be villains. This is not a new thing. Maybe you should suspect the Meep.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Malcolm Hulke wrote plenty of stories about creatures that might look a certain way but have more complexity than you give them. Um, give them credit for. Yeah, so the scene, I do appreciate the thing about the Doctor working it out. That is fun, and obviously the wig is a nice little nod. If you're I actually recently rewatched The Stones of Blood, so that one really jumped out at me. Yeah, I think the only issue is that it felt like there was probably a bigger execution of that idea at some stage. I've no idea what it would have looked like. I mean, obviously there's the comic and the audio version where it's more based on the internal monologue of the Meep, which is very hard to get into a script like this. Um, but yeah, it kind of felt as a piece of drama, like sort of pausing the episode to kind of go, by the way, we've sussed that you're a baddie. So I don't know. I kind of wanted the Meep to just expose themselves in that way. Um, but yeah, it makes me wonder. You see things like this, and you mentioned the writer's tale earlier on. That kind of highlights so many examples just from series 4 of things that happen on screen that might strike you as a bit odd, and it turns out, well, there was a problem and they had to patch it, and they go, right, okay, I'll have this thing over here answer that thing over there. um, there was a bit in Partners in Crime where he has to contrive a way to electrocute a couple of guards so that they're going to be out of the way of the Doctor and Donna. So I wondered, I thought, is there a story behind this that we're probably never going to hear? Of like, oh well, there was originally a different version of this. Maybe it was always in his head to do it that way, but I don't know. It seemed a little bit static for me. Um, it kind of externalized the reveal about the Meep instead of letting it come from something the Meep had directly done. But if it's a case of trying to hand the agency to the Doctor as opposed to him not having any in that scene, yeah, maybe that drives the decision to do it that way.
I suppose also, just on a very basic level, the episode had bigger fish to fry. It had more
Oh,
important things to
absolutely.
do. It needed to move on.
Yeah.
We could have trotted around the whole Meep isn't a bad guy thing for a. And like I say, it's so obvious. Even if you're going into that with no knowledge at all of what was going on, with not knowing either the Big Finish version or the comic, it's just so obvious
Mm.
that the Meep isn't this cute little alien. Yeah, I think that there's no point in dancing around it for so long, because the simple fact is you've got an alien that's obviously a bit iffy. Let's just
Oh.
go with it, move on, and focus on the more important stuff that the episode had to do, which was introducing characters, sorting the Donna's journey's end situation out and that kind of thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's again, I've not got a problem. It got the episode to where it needed to be in a efficient way. And while I appreciate that to some people it's not going to be the most satisfying thing ever, it does the job. And it's, I'm glad we got more focus on other stuff instead of that.
Mm. Well, I do think I very much think that the episode came about as a means to pick up the Doctor and Donna's stuff. And Russell probably at some point went, what would be a nice plot to have here, just as a kind of means to an end. And probably thought, well, nobody's done the Star Beast. That's a laugh. And yeah, it's that feeling of the Russell T Davies series opener, and that fits that tone very well. So yeah, kind of watching it, especially from that point on, the focus is so much on the Doctor and Donna, and that stuff is great. Obviously, we'll get to that, but yeah, I would be interested to know how big fans of the original comic kind of felt about it, because obviously, just on a visual and casting level, it's got to be like dream come true territory as far as getting a Beat the Meep on the screen. But in terms of the actual story, it's very much the sideshow. So I don't know. But it's, yeah, like I say, I've only heard the audio, and that was a while ago. So I was mostly just enjoying Miriam Margolyes' performance, really.
And it was an excellent performance, definitely.
Yeah.
So next sort of point of order is something else actually that the wider internet has sort of said may have been done a little bit too quickly or too suddenly, but it's sort of fixing the Donna situation, fixing the whole Doctor Donna
Yeah.
thing so that she can know who the Doctor is without dying pretty much straight away. Um, Again, I was perfectly happy with it. I kind of get that some people have said that, well, it wasn't really dramatic enough, or it just kind of happened, and it could have been something that could have been dragged across the whole trilogy. And I don't know. I think I quite like the idea of it being fixed, and now the Doctor and Donna can just have a normal Doctor Donna adventure. So yeah, I was quite happy with the way it was done. I was, quite happy with the idea that now Donna had a child, and part
Hmm.
of the meta crisis had been passed on, and I quite like that. And I think Rose is a great character. I really like the way that she's been incorporated, and it genuinely does feel like Donna has lived a relatively normal and actually quite happy life for the last 15 years, because we kind of we left her in a place where we weren't actually sure whether she was going to be happy in her life or not, and it seems to be that she has been. And again, the fact that we got just that little insight, I thought was quite nice. So, what did you think? Are you glad that the Donna situation is solved, and do you like the way it was solved?
It's yes, is the short answer, but I think you have to sort of make a choice to be okay with it, because it was quite different at the time, or it felt different. That when the terrible thing happened to Donna in Journey's End, that the next time we saw her in the End of Time, it had stuck, and through the course of that episode, you're kind of thinking, oh, there'll be a fiddle, they'll sort it out, and they don't, and they leave it, and they let that consequence stand. And Doctor Who, whether or not this is a bad thing, is a completely different conversation, but it has a bit of a habit of wriggling out of consequences sometimes. You've got the Doomsday thing where Rose is kind of tantalizing us with, I'm dead, I'm going to die, this is how I die. And it turns out that that's totally metaphorical and she's fine. Obviously, it's still bad, etc., etc. So, in a way, it is sad that we've kind of gone back on it, just because it was a piece of drama, and that was a legitimate way to end her character arc. It was tragic, and tragedy has value on its own. It's not always just a sort of road bump on the way to a happy ending. So all of that, I would understand if people said, I'm annoyed that they didn't just leave it alone. At the same time, it's an anniversary thing, and quite frankly, it's just, do you want more stories that feature Catherine Tate? And it's just, yeah. I mean, she's incredible. Donna is a very strong, well written character. Um, David Tennant obviously works superbly with her. It's certainly preferable to me to for example, what he used to do after series 4, which was just have a one-off companion. I think he did it before series 4, Voyage of the Damned as well. He'd just go somewhere and have a one-off companion. um
Well, even Donna was a one-off companion originally.
is this exactly true? Yeah, there we go. Yet another one. It's basically after Rose, it was all one-offs. um so yeah, I'm okay with it. The terms of the actual way it's resolved, I think to an extent, the fact that it was being resolved was kind of enough for me. So it was just like, oh, I don't really care about the specifics of this. The important thing here is that the writer has decided we're going to resolve it. Like that's the big deal here, and the actual resolution of it is fairly, I would say, techno babbly. I mean, I've only, I watched it last night. I was going to watch it again, but I just couldn't cram it in. So I've kind of forgotten a few little bits. But, it's very well executed. The expectation that this will kill Donna, and she's choosing to do it anyway. That's an effective dramatic choice. She effectively did sign her own death warrant there. So, you sort of have your cake and eat it. With the meta crisis thing, it's it's a very big and complicated conversation, so I'll just hand wave it, really. But I think the whole Rose thing could be sort of awkwardly misconstrued. So the kind of entwining of Rose's identity and a sci-fi thingamy like the Metacrisis. I don't know if I love that as an example of representation, because I think there's a risk there of saying here is a person of a certain type, whether it be a trans person, non-binary person, gay person, anything, and just saying this is because of a sci-fi thing. And I don't know if 100% sure that that's what the episode is even saying, but it kind of teetered on that for me. So I don't know. I felt like it would be stronger, and this is just me as just a random viewer, but it would be stronger if we just let that character be, and they can still be instrumental. The fact that Donna has had a child, and this energy has passed on, that can still be there. But the fact that it seems to directly inform the fact that this character is trans, I don't know. I think it's something that is not as streamlined as it could be in terms of intent. Like, I've absolutely no doubt that Russell, we know how pro-trans he is, and that's great. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that he intended this to be positive. But I just think it's one of those examples, because Russell kind of, as a writer, very passionate, but sometimes the messages kind of are a bit open to conversation, shall we say. So sometimes you have characters performing actions that are very negative and it's treated as positive or something like that. So I think this is just another example of that, really, where it's just like the heart is in the right place, but I can see this being a point that is debated quite a lot. And I don't think there's a clear answer beyond, well, it means well. And like we say, I mean, your reaction is a perfect example. You've kind of just seen the positive in it and just gone, well, it's great that Rose is part of this because she gets to help. And that's true. From a screenwriting perspective, she gets to be heroic in that and instrumental. So that's all good. But I thought, yeah, I'd better be honest and just say that I think it's a little murky the way it's executed.
I certainly agree that it is very open to what I suspect is misinterpretation.
Yeah.
It's like you say, there is absolutely no way that Russell T Davies will have written that with anything but the best intentions. That's just beyond doubt completely. And it's, yeah, at the end of the day, it solved the Dr. Donna thing in a way that TV just wouldn't have touched at all in 2008 or 2010 or whenever we last saw them. And I quite like that.
It's wild to think it's quite recent, isn't it? As development.
Yeah. It's actually really nice to think that Doctor Who is keeping up with, social attitudes and all this sort of thing, and it is forward moving, it is forward looking, and it always has been. So we can certainly take positive from that.
Yeah, sorry, it's worth mentioning as well that there is some tremendously strong stuff in here, representation wise. So you've got, I love the scenes of Sylvia, and she's just a well-meaning grandparent who's just trying her best to get it right and has nothing but love and support for this person, but still wobbles now and again. And I think that's very honest. And I love that Sylvia is this kind of person now, because we saw her in such a negative light sometimes in series 4, and she's really grown, and I love that. Yeah, so there's stuff in here that's just unimpeachably great, and yeah, hooray for that. And we've not even touched on Ruth Madley's character. There you go. You got a really strong, well-written wheelchair user character, prominent front and center, hopefully a recurring character. And the way they handle that is brilliant. They kind of recognize the fact that she's got this, but in one scene where there are stairs are an issue, she says, "Don't make me the problem," and it's great. You can kind of just engage with it and move on, and that's such a just a smart way to deal with things like that, and to not make it everything about a character, just to be like, yeah, it's there, it's part of it, but there's other stuff too.
We've certainly come a hell of a long way from something like, I don't know, The Deadly Assassin, which I absolutely love. You know, if I had to pick a favourite Doctor Whoever, it would be that one.
Yeah.
But the entire cast is white males. Everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've come. I mean, I know that was 40 years ago, but yeah, we've come an incredible 50 years ago. Even we've come an incredibly long way, and that's definitely a positive. That's definitely
Well,
something
it's
good.
it's it's worth saying that that wasn't the norm then. So I was watching some Avengers the other day, the old Honor Blackman episodes, and they had Asian actors in the cast, and I thought that's better representation than some examples of Doctor Who that came a decade plus later.
Well, yeah,
So these things
absolutely.
wobble, unfortunately. Yeah, you gotta fight for them and
I
keep them
think
going.
is it. I think it was Stephen Moffat who sort of said that you actively have to go looking to make these changes. They don't just happen by accident. They don't happen with the best of intentions. You genuinely have
Mm.
to actually go, no, I am casting this person in this role or this type of person in this role, that kind of thing. So it's good that that intent is absolutely there and that they are setting out to do precisely that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shall we push on to our next topic of discussion,
Oh yeah, please.
which is the new TARDIS? What do you think
Good
of the new
lord.
TARDIS?
Well, just the scale of the thing. I mean, there's obviously the moment when all the, the lights start flickering. I was pathetically impressed by that. Just I know it's essentially like a disco or something, but it's just the sheer scale of the thing. Um, it's I can't wait to see what else it can do because there's all these little doors that go off to different places. So I want to know what all that's about. And we don't get too good a look at it in action because it doesn't really have time to do that, and that's fine. Yeah, I was surprised we saw it. I thought they might hold that over until the next one, but yeah, it's definitely a different kind of thing because each TARDIS has had its own look. Obviously, they've all been quite murky so far. Not in a don't like to look at that kind of way. I think the Eccleston Tennant TARDIS has a tremendous kind of warmth to it. So does the Matt Smith one, really, and then it's more of a spooky library in Latta Smith and Capaldi, and then Jodie's one is just a whole different ball game. I mean, that's very organic again. But yeah, with this one, it's so bright and just gorgeous, really. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's better that it's brighter because it kind of, in a way, now that I'm thinking about it, it gives me flashbacks to certain 80s Doctor Who stories that were, shall we say, not very atmospherically lit. So it's very much like a Warriors of the Deep submarine in some way. But no, it's exactly what you would sort of want a giant spaceship to look like, Um, like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Arthur Dent gets a couple of goes on a spaceship before he gets to the Heart of Gold. And when he gets to the Heart of Gold, it's this big white gleaming thing, and he's like, now you're talking." So I think very much this is the kind of spaceship you can, well, very comfortably sell to Disney Plus for a start. Just look at that thing, you know,
I can definitely see there
and it has a
being
ramp.
yes, I can definitely see there being some kind of Lego set or something along those lines of that console room. It looks very
It, it has to be a
designed to
big
be
one.
marketable. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it there. But when you think about some of the big Lego sets that there are, they are immensely popular. Sort of various Star Wars spaceships and stuff tied to other
Mm.
franchises. They're big, they're grand, yeah. So I quite like that. I think it needs stuff in it. Like it's very empty, and I
Yeah.
like to think that maybe going forward, the Doctor's just going to acquire certain things to go in the TARDIS. So maybe a bit of artwork here, and it needs a hat stand. We need a hat stand back.
Well, that's the funny thing. It's so big that it could almost be a slight hindrance, really. Because if he's like, "Oh, I need to go and get that book," Capaldi, that's 10 seconds. But now it's like put the kettle on. But
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. Because you can see in Unleashed that they're still, they're still finishing it off, like clearly in the middle of the shoot. So we're probably seeing day one of it being finished. So yeah, absolutely. I'm sure once Shooty takes over, God, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it'll get another makeover in a couple of episodes' time.
Yeah, never know. But I really like it as a starting point, I guess. But I do think the TARDIS is best when it's just got basically a load of crap in it, which is how it was in An Unearthly Child, and there was all sorts of antique stuff going on and little bits that went off, like the fault locator, that kind of thing.
Yeah. One thing that's just occurred to me recently is that there's no. I don't think there's a line in there about why it's changed, because we know that the Doctor's changed, and historically, just since the new series became a thing, ever since Matt Smith, it's been at least new Doctor, new TARDIS, pretty much. I mean, I know Capaldi kind of inherited one. It was his TARDIS, really.
But he did redecorate it and change the lighting.
He did. Bookcases, exactly. But yeah, there was no line, which won't bother, your Disney Plus newbies. But as a fogey, I was kind of like, I don't know why it's done that, but maybe it's in there's that comic, isn't there, in Doctor Who magazine, Liberation of the Daleks, which I've yet to finish. I do have them all. Maybe there's a line in there to be like, oh, the TARDIS fancies a change as well. Because normally it's like, oh, it's blowing up or something. But hey ho, I can live without it. But I would like to know if it's not just, oh, the Doctor transformed, so I guess I will too. But we know they're a bit symbiotic, so maybe that's it.
Yeah, it's maybe it'll get explained as we go on. We are, as we've said, only the first episode into 3. There's still stuff going forward, and obviously, from the ending of this episode, the TARDIS is going to be involved in some capacity in the next one. So yeah, we'll see where it goes. But yeah, I like it. It's sort of a nice. Let's face it, it's what the classic series would have done with the TARDIS had it had the money, I think.
Yes, I think there's a few things in this episode that are it was always supposed to be this good, but
yeah, I mean, I honestly, up until this point, I don't think the Meep could have been particularly well done at all on screen. I think it's actually required getting to this point to actually sort of satisfactorily execute.
Yeah, I mean, you even think about Series 4. I mean, you think the Adipose looked amazing, but for what they are, which is effectively, squishy toys.
Yes.
You think something like that with fur. No, I don't think they could have done it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would have to be a prosthetic of some kind, but yeah, it'd be a totally different ball game.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've got this new TARDIS anyway, and like I say, I like it. It definitely reminds me of sort of the original David Tennant's original TARDIS. It's definitely got hints of sort of the classic TARDIS in there as well, the white and the roundels and the disco lights and all that sort of thing. And the lights change colour. There's room for different lighting to be used in there, and I don't think it will just be. Don't think it will just be overlit Warriors of the Deep all the way through.
Yeah, they can do what they want. That's the impressive thing, really. Yeah. God, this is an old person thing to say, but they've got a real control of the lighting on that set, so they can sort of do whatever they like.
Yes, absolutely. So just before we sign off, then, overall thoughts on the Star Beast. What was your sort of takeaway from it?
I think it was a very strong Russell T Davies series opener. The Doctor and Donna stuff was fantastic. I mean, we've barely even touched on David Tennant. He found a lot of subtle ways to kind of keep the performance fresh. It did not, at the same time, it felt like his level of energy had just rolled off of series 4, but he's a tremendously thoughtful actor. So there was a lot of stuff in there where you could see he was going, how can I make this feel like the character has lived on? And there have been intervening years. I thought the Meep stuff was perhaps not as strong as it could have been, but I think that was a conscious choice just because of the focus of the story. I had a good time with it. I thought it was a lot of fun. And one thing I do want to squeeze in as well is just I really like the sonic screwdriver. I'm an absolute terrible moaner for the sonic screwdriver being a convenience, which is all it is. I know that. But in this one, it's got a kind of 3D screen readout, which it's one of those things where I've never had a problem pretending that the Doctor can read stuff on the sonic screwdriver, but obviously he can't, right? So like that was just kind of Matt Smith and David Tennant putting some effort in. But the idea that you can have a screen like that is one of those things that is just, we've got the budget now, so let's do it. So I had no problem with that at all. And when he does that thing with those screens that kind of stop gunfire, I have no problem with that either, because it's two things really. It's a passive resistance, so he's using it in a way that can sort of, pause a situation, which is exactly the sort of thing you want the Doctor to do, really. But also, it's not perfect. It doesn't get him out of every situation, because if they keep shooting, they'll break the thing. So, yeah, it's just, hats off. I'm totally okay with it so far. We're waiting until it starts, raising the dead or whatever. But I was really happy with that little development. I thought that was a case of you've got the money, treat yourself.
I also like to think that when sort of the Tennant and Smith eras get the collection Blu-ray treatment, they can additional CGI that little sonic screen.
Why not? Yeah, that's a good idea.
That can be part of the updated CGI effects, as and when.
So what about you overall?
I thought it was great. Like you say, it's a Russell T Davies season opener. Yes, it's a special, and yes, it's a one of 3 stories. And I think that maybe it'd have been better if it was a series of 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, whatever episodes. But I thought what it set out to do, I think it did really well. And what we've got now is the Doctor and Donna able to just have a couple of adventures and just basically let us enjoy ourselves in this new mini era that's more than a little nostalgic for 15 years ago. And it's just something that we can kind of celebrate as part of the 60th anniversary. And I think it's great. I think it's just good to have a Russell T Davies Doctor Who episode again. It's just great to have it. It's great to have Donna. It's we've got the 14th Doctor who is, like you say, a lot like the 10th, but just little quirks, little differences, and I like the way that that's kind of played out. It's if this is kind of what we've got to look forward to over the next couple of weeks, if this is the standard, then I'm more than happy with it. And I'm looking forward to coming back next week and talking about Wild Blue Yonder, and week after to talk about The Giggle. I think it's going to be a nice few weeks to be a Doctor Who fan.
I think it's only going to get more interesting for the next 2 episodes, but I don't know anything else. But that's where I'm at. I think it's going to get very interesting next week.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to finding out who the Meep's boss is, even though we probably know already.
I don't know. I think there's people out there hoping for the Rani. Fingers crossed. Good luck, guys.
Is it just going to be the Celestial Toymaker, or is it going to be the Rani played by Paul McGann, which has been consistently rumoured since 2005, let's face it?
He'd smash it.
Oh yeah, totally. But we'll leave it there then. We'll leave it there for now, and we will come back
Cool.
next week to discuss Wild Blue Yonder and maybe the Star Beast a little bit more, because obviously having another episode of this new era will just lend it a bit more context, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Good plan.
Yeah, so thank you very much for joining me, Gareth. It's been lovely chatting about the Star Beast with you.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
We will be back for more spodcasting very soon. Goodbye now.
Ta-ra.